how will police protection work in an anarchical society? Well, first let's look at our supply and demand curves here. Obviously there is a demand for police protection, which is why it exists in the first place. Normally you have supply and demand, and they jostle, and millions of people make deals, and others hear about the deals and demand better deals until eventually you reach some sort of equilibrium or going rate for police protection. This is of course simplified, as there will be certainly different levels of police protection. You'll have community police protection, individual police protection, but yes, this is what happens in a market. Now, what happens when you give a single institution a monopoly on police protection? You get an organization that is a price maker, not a price taker. And without competition, the price maker can charge any price at once. But when you charge a higher price, less people obviously are going to buy it. Less people are able to. And the monopoly reaches a point where increasing the price any further actually results in them losing money. And so the monopoly always sets it at this point where any increase in price will cause them to lose profit. So when we give the state a monopoly on police protection, the inevitable result is that police protection will be more expensive and there will be less of it. Sound familiar? This is why police are overpriced, and is why there are manpower shortages, because the state, as a monopoly, invariably sets the price at the monopoly rate. Now, if you believe that this is okay because the police protect us from warlordism, why is it that whenever warlords come about in Western countries, the police aren't too involved? If you look at the Compton and Watts riots in the 60s and 70s, the cops just formed a ring around the areas in question and let everyone kill each other. I also know of neighborhoods in Oakland that the cops just don't go into because it's so troublesome. Okay. Also, you have the no-go zones in Britain and France, which are essentially ruled by whatever Islamic thugs took over, which makes sense. This is because, quite frankly, the state isn't in the business of getting in the weeds with bad actors of its own nation. Okay, that's hard and doesn't really make any easy money for the state. The state prefers things like issuing parking tickets and making you register your car every year and harassing bums. And they'll deal with things like liquor store robberies, but whenever the real hard cases show up, the state typically doesn't want to get involved unless they can paint a story to justify increased spending and an expansion of government regulations. Okay? This is why police are happy to wage a war on drugs, but aren't willing to patrol certain areas of high-crime cities. All right, you can make a case for increased allocations in the budget for the war on drugs, not so much for patrolling high-crime areas, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what they're supposed to do anyway. And it's also why the same principle also applies to why the U.S. military is willing to go to war with Saddam to prevent the expansion of the petro-euro, but not with Robert Mugabe. To save Zimbabweans from the price control-induced genocide. And really, just ask yourself, how many times has a cop protected you from someone attacking you? For most people, it's 0. Now ask yourself how many times a cop has harassed you. And when someone really needs protection, when they're really worried about crime, what do? If they're stupid, they'll hope the cops will save them. If they're rich, they'll hire bodyguards. If they're not rich, but smart, they'll buy a gun. And keep in mind, the reason there's organized crime is because substances are made illegal. When you make something illegal, all you are doing is creating a pretty substantial barrier to entry. You've made it more difficult to supply something, and so the supply diminishes, but it doesn't go away. And as a result, the drug trade cannot operate openly, and so you get issues with quality that cannot be resolved through private mediators. You don't know who you're dealing with because nobody can stick their heads up. Okay, it's pretty bad, and of course it leads to violence. You know, what percentage of prisoners in the U.S. are incarcerated for drug offenses? So what are the state cops busy fighting? Well, they're busy fighting against people to have control over their own bodies and against petty criminals, not the warlords. And basically, state police create organized crime by upholding insane drug laws, harass you about petty crap, and deal with the petty crooks and burglars. So here's a question. Since police deal with things like robbery and assault, but not warlordism, and create organized crime by making drugs illegal, does the state actually lower crime? In other words, I think it's debatable whether we would be better off just burning all our money we spend on police protection. Now, okay, I bet on college football every year, okay, And I see all the time that people develop socialization structures around teams and conferences and divisions. All right, this is the mental texture they develop in order to prevent them from having to actually rationalize and reason their way through things. And because of this mental texture, most people recoil at the idea of removing all police. But just think logically for a second. All right, get away from the texture. Just think about the facts and data. What do they protect you from? They don't protect you from warlords, as seen in the no-go zones in Britain and France and America. All right, if someone sticks up a liquor store, will the cops protect the liquor store owner? Okay, maybe. If someone on the street assaults you, will the cops protect you? In the old stateless territories of the western U.S., people got together and sometimes they would write laws, but usually didn't even need to, because if someone did something that was considered a crime, the gunmen of the town, the strong guys of the town, would deal with it, and 99% of the time would do it without gunfire. The lawlessness of the Wild West has been blown all out of proportion. All right, a story that has come to epitomize the violence of the Wild West involved a conflict over laws that banned guns in the town of Tombstone. You had Virgil Morgan and Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, and they confronted 5 cowboys in the city of Tombstone over carrying firearms into the town, and they ended up just shooting each other. This became known as the gunfight at the OK Corral. But what's interesting is that even this most famous gunfight of the violent West, only 3 people were killed. All right, in any modern city today, that may or may not reach the front page. As a whole, people are typically not warmongers unless they have control of some fictional entity known as the state. And even when they are, the state just turns tail and gets out of Dodge anyway. So if people were warmongers, the state has proven to be powerless to stop it anyway. And if people were warmongers, then the state would be composed of people, of the warmongering people. Both evidence and logic point to the state being a monstrously inefficient way to handle criminality.